She said it while tossing a lemon slice into her iced water like she was ordering a salad dressing. Jason's coming to the housewarming. We're friends now. Be mature, or we're done. That exact tone, light, playful, the way you'd talk about moving a chair to make room for a guest, not like she'd just invited the man she used to screw into the house I'd built with my hands. I was standing over a box labeled Tools Overbuilt as Fragile, holding a drill that had rebuilt 3 decks and 2 marriages, none of them mine. My first thought wasn't rage, it wasn't even sadness, it was clarity. So that's the test, not love, not partnership, just a low-grade psychological dare disguised as a party invite. I nodded, didn't even blink. She watched me, waiting for the reaction. I gave her none. That was mistake number 1 on her part. She thought silence meant permission. She walked out humming, something jazzy, something smug, and opened Pinterest on her tablet. Should we go navy blue for the place settings or gold? She asked. I didn't answer. When the front door clicked shut behind her, I pulled out the key ring from my jeans, the old set, the one with the storage unit tag still dangling. I'd kept that locker even after we downsized together, as she liked to phrase it to friends. Romantic, right? A man giving up space to move in with a woman who still took weekly calls from the guy who once threw her phone off a balcony during an argument. I drove across town, past the old firehouse where I used to drink coffee at 5:30 a.m., before pouring concrete, before the surgeries, before the reinvention of Marcus Domestic. Unit 145C still squeaked when opened. She never asked what happened to my grandfather's desk, or my copy of the lease, or the old cash tin I never took to the bank. I lifted the lid on the box marked "in case." Inside were 5 things. The original deed to the house, bought under my name, never officially transferred. I remember the exact moment I told her we could add her later. When we're married, I said, let's do one thing at a time. She laughed, called it old school. I was more right than I realized. The lease agreement for our new business venture, again, only my name. She was too busy managing the creative end to bother with paperwork. A photo of her and Jason from some New Year's Eve shoved in the bottom of a holiday box. She told me she threw out all the old stuff. But people don't throw away things that made them feel wanted. A sealed envelope marked "If I Go," written 3 weeks ago, before she even said the word housewarming. Call it gut instinct. A brass key she didn't know existed, to a condo in Arizona, mine. Bought silent, bought clean. I closed the box, locked the unit, and as I walked back to the car, something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't rage. This was alignment. It's strange how quickly you go from invested to detached, like watching someone else drown in a pool you just stepped out of. Before we continue, can I ask a small favor? Over 97% of you listen without subscribing, and honestly, that simple click helps our team more than you can imagine. If you're enjoying this, consider subscribing. It means everything. Now, back to the storm that was about to blow wide open in our living room. Later that night, I sat across from her on the couch while she debated appetizer spreads. Do you think charcuterie's too heavy? She asked. Depends who's chewing it, I said. She didn't catch the sarcasm. I watched her scroll through old messages. She smirked at one, then tilted the screen slightly out of my line of sight. That was mistake number 2. You don't hide what you're not tempted by. I already knew the one she was looking at. Jason, weeks ago, on her birthday post. You still light up a room. She replied, then deleted it after I liked the comment. But the internet doesn't delete fast enough. Screenshot saved, just in case. Because this wasn't about a party, or a friendship, or even some immature fantasy of reconciliation. This was about seeing how far she could push before I broke. What she didn't know was, I don't break, I vanish. And I take everything with me. Jason was a name that came with sighs, not tears, not anger. Sighs, the kind you let out when you remember something that once made you feel powerful and foolish at the same time. He was complicated, Tessa would say, as if that word explained away every door slammed and every voicemail she used to replay twice. We had history. Sure, world wars had history. So do car accidents. In the beginning, I played the adult, nodded when she told me he still checked in once in a while, said it was about closure and maturity. I pretended not to notice the little shifts in her tone when she mentioned his name. soft, nostalgic, as if she were speaking in italics, but lately it had become less about mentions and more about shadows. She'd tagged me in 2 out of 10 posts, always the ones about food or furniture or the dog, never the ones about her, the selfies, the wine tastings, the accidental dinner shots with mutual friends. No mention of Mark. Jason, though, always lurking in the comments. Still got that smile, he wrote under a photo of her at some friend's rooftop party. She replied, LOL behave, then deleted it an hour later. I didn't even say a word, just hit the screenshot, saved it to a folder I labeled paint samples, because if you're going to tear a wall down, you better know what color it used to be. I watched her carefully after that, the subtle makeup changes, the more daring tops, the sudden interest in early morning workouts when she hated waking up before 9. One afternoon, I caught her smiling at her phone like it had just whispered a secret. She noticed me watching and said, Maya sent me a meme. I nodded. Maya doesn't text. She voice messages. She was lying to me the way people lie when they're proud of it. Like the deception itself was a mark of personal freedom, so I stopped asking questions and started logging answers. I used to think trust meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Now I understand it's more about auditing the ledgers while they're still pretending to run the business. Tessa wasn't cheating, not technically, but emotional loyalty isn't just about where your body goes. It's about who you perform for. She started curating her life again for someone who used to make her cry in restaurant parking lots. That's what made it worse. She wasn't even being tempted by someone worthy. She was regressing, and somehow she wanted me to clap from the sidelines. I remember sitting on the patio one evening as she FaceTimed her sister. I overheard, Jason's going to be at the party. I think it'll be interesting. Her voice had that upper register, the one she used when she knew she was towing a line and daring someone to call it out. I looked at the bottle of scotch in front of me, the good one, the one I was saving for the night we closed escrow. I poured a glass and drank to the fact that I wouldn't be around to see her try to make nostalgia look like growth. The next day, she asked if we could do a new photo wall. Our journey in pictures, she said. I handed her a USB stick and said, be my guest. What she didn't realize was that I'd removed every picture of me after month 6, because that was when I stopped showing up in her life. Even if I was still standing right beside her, she thought I didn't notice. But I'd already mapped every inch of my escape, not through her lies, but through her silences. And that's where the real betrayal lived, not in what she said, but in what she left out. The drive to the storage unit was quiet, not the peaceful kind, more like the silence you get before a controlled demolition. You don't hear the blast until the building's already leaning. She was home, somewhere between Pinterest boards and canapé recipes. I told her I was picking up light bulbs. She kissed my cheek and said, get the warm ones. Jason says they're better for ambiance. Then giggled like it was an inside joke. It was, just not one I was part of. The box was there, exactly where I left it, corner of Unit 145C, beneath a wool coat no one wears in Arizona. I pulled it out gently, almost reverently. The top was marked in my handwriting, in case. It used to mean in case of disaster. Now it meant in case of clarity. I cracked the seal. The first thing I touched was the house deed, still under my name, as it always had been. Tessa never asked to co-sign, not because she trusted me, but because she thought she didn't need to. That's the quiet arrogance of someone who's used to being adored and rarely held accountable. Then the lease for our shared business venture, the one she bragged about over wine tastings and Zoom calls, all sweat equity from her, all real equity from me. The lease was inked solely in my name. She liked the title co-founder, but when it came time to put money down, she had expenses. Next was the bank book, untouched funds, a quiet stack of I told you so in financial form, separate, secure, and well hidden under the fake tax returns I'd mocked up just to fill the envelope. I sat there for a moment and took a long breath. Then I pulled out the letter. It had been sitting in my desk drawer for 3 weeks, written one night after she laughed a little too hard at a meme Jason sent her. She tilted the phone away from me, same move she used to do when we first started dating, and she wasn't ready to show me her full self. The letter wasn't poetic, just surgical, measured. Tessa, if you're reading this, I left before you did. You just didn't notice, not because you didn't care, but because you assumed I never would. You kept telling me to be mature. So I am. This is me, being the man you underestimated. I dated it, folded it neatly, slid it into the envelope, and placed it beside the deed. Then, almost without thinking, I added something else. Her bracelet. A thin gold bangle I found in the glove compartment of her car 6 months ago. It wasn't hers. It had initials etched on the inside. L plus J. When I asked, she said, "Oh, that's from Lisa. I borrowed it once at brunch." Lisa told me she'd never seen it. I didn't press. I just filed it under eventual confirmation. Now, it was back in the box, like a receipt for a transaction I never agreed to. I closed the lid, locked the unit. On the way back to the truck, I scheduled the courier. Overnight delivery. Special handling. Signature required. Not to Tessa. To my attorney. She didn't know I still had one. Thought I let him go when I committed to this chapter. But I never delete numbers. Especially not the ones that protect me from women who mistake kindness for softness. When I got home, she was assembling place cards. "I'm thinking of putting Jason next to Maya. They'll either love it or kill each other," she joked, not looking up. "Perfect," I said. "Can't wait." She glanced at me. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking," I replied. She smiled, completely unaware of what I'd buried 3 miles away under layers of concrete legal language and emotional restraint. Not secrets. Just proof. Proof that when the lights finally flickered and the room got cold, I didn't flinch. I planned. 2 nights before the party, the living room looked like a wedding planner had exploded. Swatches, candles, tiny silver envelopes with embossed names. Tessa hovered over it all like a conductor, barefoot, wine in hand, humming to herself as she finalized the seating chart with the precision of a military strategist. "Everything has to feel intentional," she murmured. "Like we're building a community, not just hosting a party." Her voice was syrupy. Intentional. She said we, but this was her show. I was just the stage she stood on. I watched her tape up the RSVP board, a huge white foam display with handwritten names in gold marker, color-coded by table. Jason's name was at the very top, not alphabetically, not by accident. First, right under Welcome Friends. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Tessa followed my eyes. "Oh, Jason RSVP'd early. He's helping Maya with the wine tasting setup. Totally harmless." That tone again, the one where every word has a hidden clause. I nodded. "Makes sense?" She smiled too quickly. "Glad you're cool with it. You've really grown, you know that?" I went out for more ice right after that. Drove around the block twice and pulled over near a park. Opened my notes app, scanned the guest list, and then I saw the new name that hadn't been mentioned in any of our talks. Lisa. Jason's off and on. Mostly off, but still close enough to be in Tessa's phone under don't answer. I called Maya. She always overshares when she drinks. "Hey, is Lisa coming to the party?" I asked casually. "Huh? Oh yeah, didn't Tessa tell you? Jason asked if he could bring her. She was weird about it, but then said, sure, why not? Kinda awkward, right?" "Yeah," I said, "real awkward." So that's how it was going to play out. Jason up front. Lisa added late, me placed somewhere nearby, probably across the room, far enough to simmer, close enough to observe. Tessa wasn't just testing boundaries, she was orchestrating tension, seeing if I'd crack, if I'd growl, if I'd finally mark territory like a jealous teenager. But I wasn't jealous. I was done. Done hoping she'd learn respect through reminders. Done thinking love meant swallowing her power games with a polite smile. Done mistaking her cruelty for carelessness. Jason wasn't a threat. He was a mirror, a living, breathing version of what she still wanted approval from. She could have chosen anyone else to represent her past, but she chose the one person I'd never fully be. Unpredictable, dramatic, emotionally reckless. It wasn't a dinner guest list, it was bait, and I wasn't biting. I walked back into the house to find her trying on earrings. "These are the hoops," she asked, holding both up. "Whichever you want," I said. She turned to look at me, slightly suspicious of my calm. "You're being very chill about all this," she said. "You told me to be mature." Her smile faltered just enough to tell me she hadn't expected compliance. She expected conflict. And that was the problem. She needed the friction, needed to watch me squirm. But I'd already burned the fuse and stepped back. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the office and pulled out the envelope again. Inside was everything ready to go. Withdrawal letters from the joint venture, a certified copy of the house deed with my signature to revoke shared interest, and the photo of the ring I'd been hiding in the garage. All that was missing now was the final push, the handshake. Jason would arrive. He'd smile like a man who knew he had an audience, and I'd give him exactly what he came for. Center stage, then I'd walk right off it, let her explain to Lisa why the housewarming turned into a funeral, let her sip wine with Jason and wonder when it all started to fall apart. Because the truth, it never fell. I pulled it down piece by piece, silently, strategically, and when it was done, not a single nail would be out of place. Just gone. The night before the party, the house felt like it had been staged for a real estate shoot. Overdone, unnatural, like someone trying too hard to convince buyers there was warmth behind the walls. Tessa floated around barefoot, holding a stemless wine glass, like it was an extension of her personality. She wore that silk robe she only brought out for special occasions, not for me, for photos, for herself. "Let's do a dry run," she chirped. "You know, in case people arrive early or Jason brings someone unexpected." The name dropped like ice in hot oil. She said it without flinching. "Practice now. Comfortable." I followed her from room to room as she pointed out imaginary guests. "You'll greet people here. I'll be near the bar cart. Maybe Jason stands by the patio. He loves the view. You two can talk about the landscaping or something neutral." I raised an eyebrow. "You worried I'll set off fireworks?" She laughed too quickly. "Just don't glare at Jason. Promise me that much?" I smiled. "Don't worry. I'll be very mature." Her laugh this time was softer, almost proud, like she believed she'd won something. She hadn't. I was just waiting for the curtain call. When she went upstairs to prep her skin for tomorrow's glow, I went to the office and opened the drawer on the left, the one she never touched, mostly because it contained boring things, receipts, charger cables, insurance docs. The envelope was still there, thick, sealed, unassuming. I laid everything out on the desk, one item at a time. First, the resignation letter, signed, dated, copied in triplicate. Withdrawal from our shared project with immediate effect. No money owed, no recourse, no contact. Second, the extra house key, a copy I made when I changed the locks 6 months ago, just in case things ever went sideways. She thought I had 2, I had 5. Third, the one-way ticket. Flagstaff. Window seat. Non-refundable. Departure, 11:35 a.m., the morning after the party. I'd already set the alarm on my phone for 6:30. No bags packed, not yet. I wanted to leave it all behind like a clean surgical scar, bare, precise, undeniable. On top of the envelope, I placed one last thing, a Polaroid. Not of her, not of us, of the vacant condo I'd bought 6 months ago. Just the bare walls, the floor lamp I assembled myself, the key resting on the marble counter. Solitude documented, proof that I'd planned this, not reacted. Back in the living room, she was lighting candles and adjusting throw pillows for symmetry. I watched her through the hallway mirror. She caught my reflection and smiled. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect," she said. "For you, maybe," I murmured. She didn't hear me. Or maybe she did and chose not to respond. That was her specialty, ignoring the things that didn't fit the narrative. I sat on the arm of the couch and watched her rehearse small talk with ghosts. "Hi, welcome. Oh, you look amazing," she chirped into the air. I imagined Jason walking through the door, him scanning the room for his spot, her lighting up like a marquee. Then I pictured my hand reaching for his, the moment our palms touched, the split second where the entire illusion cracked. Everything was in place. The paperwork, the exit strategy, the silence she wouldn't know how to fight. She thought she was orchestrating a performance. She didn't realize I'd already written the final scene, and all I needed was a handshake. The doorbell rang at 7:04 p.m., 4 minutes past start time, right on cue for dramatic effect. Tessa had been pacing for the last 15, fluffing pillows that were already fluffed, checking her lipstick and every reflective surface. The wine bottles were uncorked and breathing. Her playlist was looping some faux French jazz, and she'd just adjusted the RSVP board for the 3rd time. "Relax," I said from the kitchen, sipping bourbon. "It's not a product launch. It's important," she replied, smoothing her dress again. "It's our home." I didn't answer, just watched her perform. It was always about the image. The perfect house, the perfect couple, the perfect display of we made it, even if only one of us was in the picture. The first wave of guests came in bursts. Handshakes, laughter, compliments on the open floor plan she took credit for designing. She never once mentioned that I spent 2 months rebuilding that deck with my own hands after the contractor bailed. Her idea of contribution was pointing at inspiration photos and saying, more like this, but less masculine. The doorbell rang again. I heard the voice before I saw him. "Where's the hostess with the mostest?" Jason called out, bold and booming like a man entering his own damn party. A few people laughed, turned their heads. Tessa moved like gravity had changed. She all but floated across the room, arms open. "You made it," she said, wrapping him in a hug that lasted 3 seconds longer than it should have. Her perfume lingered in the air between them. He was wearing that smug confidence only men who've been forgiven too many times can pull off. The kind that says, "I know I'm a problem, but I'm your favorite one." They laughed, talked low. She touched his arm twice before he even looked at me. Then he did. "Hey, man," Jason said, finally stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Big congrats. Gorgeous place." I smiled, took his hand, looked him in the eye, then leaned in, calm as a priest, and said quietly, "She's all yours. I'm leaving. Permanently." Jason blinked. "Wait, what?" But I'd already turned away. I walked to the kitchen counter, set my glass down next to the cutting board she had garnished with grapes like we were feeding royalty. I picked up the envelope, thick, heavy, final, then walked toward the door. Tessa caught sight of me, confused. "Where are you going?" I didn't break stride. "Mark?" That tone, sharper, more urgent. "Mark, what the hell?" Every conversation in the room died instantly. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Laughter turned into silence so fast you could feel the air shift. I stopped just before the threshold, turned, met her eyes. "You wanted me to be mature," I said. "This is maturity." The look on her face was half horror, half disbelief, the kind people have when the punchline doesn't come, when the person they thought would always absorb it finally leaves the ring. I opened the door, stepped out into the cool night air, and pulled it shut behind me. No slam, no scene, no drama, just the sound of a party collapsing under the weight of what wasn't said. She stood frozen in the doorway, holding a half-full wine glass and a smile she couldn't figure out how to drop. Behind her, the living room sat in stunned silence. Guests stiff, glasses midair, a Spotify jazz loop trying and failing to cover the thick unease now spreading through her perfectly curated evening. Someone whispered, "Was that serious?" Another replied, "I think he just left, like really left." Tessa blinked twice, then bolted. "Mark," she called, already halfway across the threshold. Her heels snapped like gunfire against the stone path. "Mark, what the hell is this?" I kept walking, hands in pockets, street lights ahead glowing like finish lines. She caught up, breath sharp, voice louder. "You're making a scene." "No," I said without turning. "You already made it. I'm just leaving the stage." "You're overreacting." "It was a party," she snapped, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my jacket, a reflex she didn't realize she had. "This is insane." I stopped, turned to her, calm, focused. No rage, no show, just an end. I handed her the envelope. "You wanted maturity," I said. "This is it." She stared at the envelope like it was ticking. "What is this?" "I'm not fighting over you with a man you invited into our home like a test. I'm not 15. I'm not going to puff my chest out at your ex for your entertainment." Her mouth opened, closed. The script she had in mind didn't fit the scene unfolding in front of her. She expected jealousy, an outburst, a drunken lashing. Instead, she got exile. Quiet, deliberate exile. "I told you Jason and I were friends," she hissed, trying to pivot into damage control. "You said you were okay with it. I said I'd be mature. And I was. I didn't fight you. I didn't embarrass you. I just removed myself." She looked down at the envelope, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt. "What is this, Mark? What's in here?" "Everything you thought I wouldn't do," I said, but did anyway. Her eyes flicked back toward the house. Guests pretending not to stare. Jason standing near the door like a schoolboy who just realized the principal walked in mid-prank. Lisa watching with a cocktail in her hand and a smug grin that made it worse. Tessa turned back to me, voice cracking just slightly. "Can we talk about this tomorrow? Just not tonight. Please don't do this now." "This wasn't sudden," I said. It just looks that way because you weren't watching. Mark, you wanted to know how much you could get away with, I said. Now you know. Then I turned, and this time she didn't follow, not because she didn't want to, but because the only thing louder than the click of my shoes on the pavement was the sound of no one backing her up. Tessa stood under the porch light like a woman freshly pulled from a dream she couldn't quite remember. The envelope in her hand felt heavier than its contents could possibly explain. Her fingers trembled slightly, but not from the night air. She opened it on instinct, like maybe whatever was inside would help her regain control. Reverse the moment, reclaim the narrative. Instead, it dismantled her. First, the letter, 1 page, handwritten, no pleasantries, just the cut. If you wanted a performance, I'm not your man. If you wanted respect, you shouldn't have rehearsed betrayal. She read it twice, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something softer. They didn't. Beneath the letter was the deed, signed, notarized, and stamped. The house was his again, fully, legally, irrevocably. The home she'd told friends she designed, curated, manifested, was gone in a signature. Next, a packet clipped together, withdrawal notices from their shared project, filed, processed, official. He hadn't just left the project. He'd dissolved every link to her name. Contacts were informed, clients transferred, access revoked. She flipped through the pages, chest tightening, breath shortening. The last item wasn't paper. It was a photo. A velvet box, open, resting on their kitchen island. Inside it, a ring, simple, elegant, unmistakably meant for her finger. Underneath, in his handwriting, not anymore. Her knees buckled slightly. She sat on the porch step, unable to stand. From behind, she heard footsteps. Jason, slow, tentative. Is everything? He asked, stopping short. She didn't answer. He glanced over her shoulder, saw the documents, the photo, the signature line. His lips parted, but no words came. And then he took a step back, another, like someone realizing they'd wandered into the blast radius too late. Tessa looked up, eyes wide, unfocused. He planned this, she whispered. He had it all ready, for weeks. Jason didn't speak, just nodded once and took another step backward toward the door. Inside the house, the party had collapsed into a hushed buzz. No music, no chatter, just the clinking of glasses being awkwardly placed down and a few guests gathering coats, whispering excuses. Maya appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene on the porch, and turned around. No questions, no sympathy. Lisa lingered just inside, her smirk gone. Tessa looked down at the ring photo again, like it might turn into the real thing if she stared hard enough. But it didn't. Everything she'd counted on, his predictability, his softness, his silence, was gone. What remained was a paper trail, signed, sealed, delivered, and not a single piece of it could be shared anymore. Not the home, not the business, not the future, not even the blame. The party didn't end so much as it deflated. Slowly, shamefully, like a balloon leaking in the corner while everyone pretended not to hear it. One by one, the guests slipped out, avoiding eye contact like they'd all just witnessed a public firing. A few mumbled polite excuses. Early morning tomorrow. Forgot to feed the dog. Left the oven on. None of them offered help. None of them hugged her. Maya didn't even say goodbye. She passed Tessa in the hallway with her eyes down, muttering something about forgetting her wine glass. She left it behind anyway. Lisa stayed longer than she should have, maybe out of curiosity, maybe because watching someone else's humiliation unfold in real time was her version of dessert. She sipped from a lukewarm cocktail and leaned against the doorframe with the confidence of someone who'd seen enough bad endings to know when one was final. She looked at Jason, who hadn't moved from his awkward hover near the entryway. "You didn't know he'd do that?" she asked, brow arched. Jason exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Nope," he said. "Guess he was more mature than both of us." Then he turned and walked out without another word. No hug, no smug comment, not even a glance at Tessa. That stung. She closed the door behind him and stood in the silence he left behind. Outside, the last car engine hummed, then faded. Inside, the playlist Mark had made weeks ago still looped quietly on the Bluetooth speaker. His taste, his tempo, tracks selected to create a mood that no longer fit the room. Smooth jazz now sounded sarcastic. She walked to the speaker, paused, then let it play. Turning it off felt like admitting he'd been the only one who brought ambiance to the evening. In the dining room, half-finished champagne glasses lined the table like ghosts. Cheese plates sat untouched. The RSVP board was still pinned to the wall, Jason's name proudly at the top. She stared at it, then ripped it down, leaving a torn corner behind. Upstairs, she changed out of her dress and slipped into the robe she wore the night before, the one he'd watched her float around in, rehearsing for a future that no longer existed. It felt heavier now, like a costume with no performance. She sat on the bed, opened her phone, scrolled past Mark's name, still pinned to the top. She paused on Jason's, hovered, then hit delete contact. A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to delete Jason? She pressed yes before the question finished forming. But the damage wasn't in the phone, it was in the silence of the house. Half unpacked, half claimed. There were boxes he hadn't touched because he'd known. Rooms left unfinished because he'd already planned to leave them behind. The wine rack still had the bottle they were going to open the night after the party. A Pinot he'd said reminded him of their first trip to Oregon. She looked at it like it belonged to someone else. Because now it did. She walked room to room, turning off lights. In the office, the chair he always used was gone. The drawer where the envelope had been now sat open, empty. On the kitchen island, the Polaroid still lay face up, the ring in the photo catching light from the pendant lamp overhead. She picked it up, stared, then flipped it over. Blank. Of course it was. No message, no second chance. Just a placeholder for what could have been. By the time she crawled into bed, the house no longer felt like hers. It was a showroom with no buyer, a celebration without a reason. And somewhere, probably on a plane, Mark was already sleeping soundly. No regrets, no explanation owed. He had given her exactly what she asked for, maturity, and in return, taken everything she thought he'd never walk away from. 3 days passed. No calls, no emails, no messages, not even a forwarded bill or forgotten sock. Tessa checked her phone obsessively the first night, left the ringer on, slept with it under her pillow like a teenager praying for some miracle apology text that would unravel what had so efficiently come undone. But Mark didn't text, because Mark didn't need to. The silence was louder than any fight they'd ever had, and she'd started most of them. By the third morning, the ache in her chest had shifted. No longer panic, no longer disbelief, just a dull throb of reality settling into its rightful place. She stood in the kitchen with her coffee, watching the sun rise through a window that used to feel warm. The house had taken on a new echo. Every footstep bounced back, unanswered. Every cupboard door sounded like a closing argument. She stared at the fridge. There was a crooked magnet still holding up a dry cleaning receipt from 2 weeks ago. Mark had left that too, not by mistake. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. A small envelope sat on the mat. No stamp, no sender, just a postcard tucked neatly inside. She pulled it out and felt the familiar churn return. The front showed the Arizona desert, red rocks under a vast sky, solitary, still, too beautiful to feel empty. She flipped it over. One sentence. You wanted the party. I wanted a partnership. We both got what we deserved. No signature. She read it 3 times, her throat tightening with each pass. There was no blame in the message, no venom, no hope either. Just closure, real closure. The kind you don't respond to because there's nothing left to say. She stood in the living room surrounded by unpacked boxes and borrowed furniture. The RSVP board was gone. The menu cards burned, even Jason's number deleted. None of it helped. None of it fixed the fact that Mark was gone. And not just in the logistical sense. He'd taken the version of himself she'd always assumed would be there. The fallback man, the fixer, the silent partner who'd pick up after her indulgences, forgive her mood swings, absorb her rehearsals for drama like some emotional stunt double. But she hadn't realized the silence wasn't surrender. It was sharpening. It was planning. And now all that was left of him was a single sentence on a postcard, and a silence so complete it echoed in her bones. She placed the card on the mantel, right where she used to keep scented candles and curated travel books she never read. This would stay, not as a reminder of him, but as proof. Proof that someone had once loved her enough to build a life beside her, and then respected himself enough to walk away when she tried to make him compete for his own dignity. She didn't cry, she just stood there, understanding finally what maturity really meant. It wasn't staying calm during conflict. It wasn't swallowing pain to keep the peace. It was exit, the clean kind, the irreversible kind, the kind that doesn't slam doors because it doesn't need to. And for the first time in her life, Tessa understood the opposite of noise isn't silence, it's absence.